Welcome to True Echo, where real moments echo louder than fiction. In today's story, a quiet man with a forgotten past changes everything. Armed with nothing but a mop, a whiteboard marker, and a mind sharper than anyone could have guessed. What started as a cruel joke turned into a lesson no one at Harrison West High would ever forget. It only takes one moment to shift the balance of a room. At exactly 11:07 a.m., inside room 2C of Harrison West High, the moment arrived cloaked in the ordinary. The flickering overhead light, something students had grown so used to they barely noticed, buzzed like a tired bee. A dull clock ticked overhead, dragging time toward the lunch bell with glacial slowness. At the front of the class, Mr. Landon Chase paced with the practiced authority of someone used to being the smartest voice in the room. He was tall, clean-cut, with every shirt ironed sharp as his sarcasm. Landon Chase didn't yell. He didn't need to. His wit was a scalpel, carving just enough to wound egos without ever being called out. He prided himself on making kids think, though more often than not they just learned to shut up faster. The lesson that day was on the chain rule, a concept already melting the attention span of most in the room. Phones buzzed quietly beneath desks. Eyes flitted toward the windows where sunlight beckoned. One student had all but surrendered to sleep when the sound came. The squeak of a mop. Faint but distinct, it sliced through the lull like a whisper turned megaphone. Without turning, Mr. Chase smirked, tapping the whiteboard with mock enthusiasm. "Mr. Greer," he called toward the door, "you think you could handle this one?" A few students snorted. One girl covered her mouth. Another started recording, hoping to catch whatever humiliation would unfold next. In the hallway, Malcolm Greer stood motionless. Mid-50s, dark navy uniform, silver threading above his heart. M. Greer. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't angry. He simply looked. The silence deepened. No one expected a response, certainly not compliance. But then, slowly, Malcolm leaned his mop against the wall. He wiped his hands with a towel from his waistband and stepped inside the room like a man walking into a place he already owned. Mr. Chase cocked an eyebrow. "Want to give it a shot?" Malcolm nodded once. No flourish. No speech. He approached the whiteboard with the ease of someone returning home after a long absence. His steps weren't showy, just steady. He picked up the dry erase marker with fingers worn from years of labor, but still strong. Then he paused, only for a second, reading the equation with calm familiarity. The kind of calm that doesn't beg for attention but commands it anyway. Behind him the class stilled. Then he wrote. Not in frenzied scribbles or dramatic gestures. Just clear, deliberate strokes. Each number, each operator, each transformation of the equation laid out with silent precision. As the symbols aligned, as each step revealed the next, the room leaned in, physically, emotionally, drawn to something none of them expected. "This is a chain rule problem," Malcolm said, voice low, textured like a soft jazz track. "But really it's about recognizing patterns." Mr. Chase's jaw shifted. His arms slowly dropped from their crossed position. The board filled with logic, not just math. It wasn't just that Malcolm was right. It was that he made the complexity feel familiar, like peeling an orange and suddenly realizing you knew how to do it all along. When he capped the marker and stepped away, the equation sat complete, perfect, indisputable. "That's one way to do it," he said. Silence. Trevor Guyan, the sophomore who had been filming, whispered loud enough for everyone to hear, "Wait, he just did that, in his head?" It wasn't mockery. It was awe. Mr. Chase fumbled for a retort but landed only on, "Well, he got the right answer." But the sarcasm had fled his voice, leaving only something hollow, something dangerously close to respect. Malcolm didn't gloat. He didn't even smile. He just turned, walked to the door, picked up his mop and resumed his work. But everything had changed. By the time the lunch bell rang, the clip had been uploaded, shared, reposted, and memed. Headlines and group chats across the student body read, "Our janitor just cooked Chase on chain rule." In every corner of Harrison West, the question buzzed louder than gossip. Who is Mr. Greer really? That evening, Malcolm sat in his small apartment, a place where silence was a choice, not a sentence. He pulled a cardboard box from under his bed. Inside, a cracked calculator, a faded Ohio State sweatshirt, and a photo of him with his mother on freshman move-in day. She'd been so proud. Said education was the key they couldn't take from you. He'd believed her, until life proved that sometimes even the key doesn't open the right doors. The transcript inside the envelope still read, Mechanical Engineering, GPA 3.87. But now, decades and heartbreak later, all the student saw was a janitor. Until today. Malcolm held the photo, eyes lingering on his mother's smile. "The world will try to lock you out," she used to say. "So carry your own key." Maybe, just maybe, that key still worked. The next morning, Harrison West High was buzzing. Whispers swept through lockers like wind through trees. In the cafeteria, students leaned over trays of lukewarm pancakes, whispering the same question in different variations. "Did you see the video? Yo, the janitor's a genius. I heard he used to be some engineer. Why is he even here?" Even teachers weren't immune. In the faculty lounge, Miss Amber Rowan, who taught physics, blinked at the clip as it played on Mr. Patel's phone for the third time. She set down her sandwich mid-bite. "He solved it, without a calculator?" "Not just solved it," Patel muttered. "He broke it down like he was teaching a grad class." No one had seen it coming. Malcolm Greer had worked at the school for 6 years. He was early always. The lights came on in the morning because of him. Trash never lingered longer than a class period. Bathrooms were stocked. Floors were immaculate. But no one had asked what he used to do. No one thought to ask. Because he was the janitor. That afternoon, students gathered outside the janitor's closet, half in curiosity, half in quiet reverence. The same Trevor who had recorded the video stood holding his calculus notebook, chewing his bottom lip. When Malcolm opened the door, a trash bag in one hand, Trevor hesitated before saying, "Mr. Greer, would you mind looking at this?" He held up the page like it might get rejected. Malcolm paused, eyes flicking to the problem. "Let's take a look," he said. No fanfare. No pretense. Just a quiet conversation. Two heads bent over a math problem. Two people trying to make sense of something complicated. That was how it started. The next day Trevor was back. This time with Jasmine Ortega, a junior with fierce eyeliner and a history of math-induced panic attacks. She held up a crumpled quiz with a 41 circled in red. "I don't get what I'm doing wrong," she said. "I read it 3 times. Malcolm didn't tell her to focus more or study harder. He asked, "Which part didn't make sense?" Her eyes widened. No teacher had ever asked her that. "Let's take 10 minutes, he said. But 10 became 20. That hallway session became a routine. By Friday, 6 students had joined. They sat cross-legged on the floor, scribbling formulas on paper, asking each other questions. One kid called it Greer circles as a joke. The name stuck. Malcolm never advertised. He didn't call it a club. There were no flyers, no formal invitations. But word spread like wildfire because when students left those circles, they didn't just understand math better. They felt seen. He didn't talk at them. He talked with them. He didn't just explain, he listened. He wasn't supposed to be there. Not like that. Not teaching. But he was. And it worked. Within 2 weeks, 12 students were gathering outside the janitor's closet after school. By week 3, they relocated to the library corner where a dusty whiteboard had been dragged out from the AV closet. Amina, a sophomore who once cried over fractions, now stayed after school voluntarily. Isaiah, who used to doodle in math class, now raced Malcolm to answers. Students started quoting Malcolm in other classes. "Remember what Mr. Greer said, don't rush it, recognize the pattern." But not everyone was pleased. Somewhere in the faculty chain a complaint slipped through. Anonymous. Concerned. Professional in tone but cutting in intent. Is it appropriate for a janitor to tutor students in an academic setting? Is he certified to provide instruction? It landed on Principal Dana Morales' desk with all the subtlety of a thrown brick. She read it twice, lips tightening. Then she wrote a reply. "Mr. Greer is not seeking a teaching position. He is responding to student requests for help. We should ask ourselves why we never thought to value his expertise sooner." She didn't tell Malcolm. Not yet. But she watched. Meanwhile, the circles kept growing. Tuesdays and Thursdays after the bell, the library corner filled up. Students sat on the floor, notebooks open, pencils ready, attention fixed. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Some teachers noticed. Miss Rowan stopped by to borrow one of Malcolm's analogies for explaining parabolas. Coach Alvarez offered to wheel in another whiteboard. Even the librarian, Mrs. Canley, cleared shelf space for Malcolm's handwritten notes. And Mr. Chase? He stayed silent. He didn't join the sessions. He didn't comment in the lounge. But he started avoiding eye contact in the hallways. The sarcasm that once defined him turned into quiet withdrawal. The man who had started it all with a joke now watched from the shadows, unsure if the punchline had backfired, or transformed into something he no longer understood. The students noticed his absence. Jasmine whispered once, "You think he's mad, 'cause Mr. Greer did it better?" Isaiah shrugged. "Or maybe, 'cause Mr. Greer did it at all." But Malcolm? He said nothing. He just kept showing up. Brought fresh worksheets. Reviewed old notebooks. Asked good questions. Stayed late. Until one day it happened. Thursday afternoon. The light in the library was gold, slanting through high windows. Malcolm stood before the whiteboard, explaining an integral to 4 students. The marker squeaked gently. The room buzzed with silent concentration. Then the door creaked open. Mr. Chase entered. He didn't speak. He didn't posture. He just looked tired. Humbled. "Mind if I sit in?" he asked. No one responded. Until Malcolm, without blinking, gestured to an empty chair. "As long as you don't mind learning something." A ripple of laughter passed through the students, soft but warm. Chase didn't smile much, but this time he did. And for the next 20 minutes he sat there, not talking, not correcting, just listening. When Malcolm broke the problem down into 3 elegant steps, Chase leaned forward, scribbled something on his notepad, and nodded. When it ended, the students packed up slowly. Trevor gave Malcolm a high five. Jasmine handed him a new marker. Isaiah said, "You should teach full-time." When they were gone, only 2 men remained. Chase stood, hesitated, then said quietly, "You're good at this." Malcolm didn't smirk. He didn't gloat. He just said, "Thanks." Because for him it was never about being right. It was always about showing up. The quiet between 2 decisions often holds more weight than the choices themselves. The next morning, Malcolm was pushing his mop down the tiled corridor near the front office when Principal Morales stepped into the hallway. She held a manila folder in her left hand and a small, cautious smile on her face. "Malcolm," she called gently. He looked up, wiped his hands on the towel tucked into his waistband, and approached. She gestured toward her office. "You have a minute?" He followed without a word, boots squeaking faintly across the floor. Inside the air was still. Principal Morales didn't sit behind her desk. Instead, she leaned against its edge, the folder resting beside her. "I've received a request from the school board," she began, her fingers brushing over the folder's surface. Malcolm remained standing, arms at his sides. "They've seen the footage," she continued, "the calculus video. They've heard from parents too. The thing is, they're interested. They want to turn your tutoring into something more formal." His eyebrows raised, barely. "They're proposing an official after-school enrichment program. Nothing big. Voluntary. But it wouldn't interfere with your current role." Malcolm didn't respond immediately. His eyes dropped to his hands, calloused, strong, steady. The same hands that once helped his mother into a wheelchair. The same hands that fixed broken boilers, replaced ceiling tiles, wiped graffiti off bathroom stalls. "I haven't taught in a long time," he said, voice low. "You never stopped knowing," Morales replied. "And the kids, they trust you." He was silent. "What about the people who've complained?" he finally asked. "The ones who don't think I should be helping." Principal Morales didn't flinch. "Credentials matter," she said firmly. "But presence matters more. And connection. Well, you're reaching these students in ways many of us never could." Malcolm didn't open the folder. He didn't ask about stipends or titles. He just nodded slowly. "I'll think about it." That night, he pulled the old box from beneath his bed again. The sweatshirt from Ohio State. The cracked calculator. The photo of him and his mother, arms wrapped around each other on move-in day. And now, something new, a folded note from Trevor. "Mr. Greer, thank you for helping me understand what Mr. Chase couldn't. I finally get it now." Malcolm folded it carefully and tucked it inside. The following Tuesday, the library's northeast corner looked different. The folding chairs were no longer mismatched. They'd been scrubbed clean. The whiteboard stood freshly wiped. A stack of blank paper waited beside a jar of sharpened pencils. And in the center of the table sat a plain black binder with Greer circles, notes and worksheets scrawled across the front in bold Sharpie. Students began trickling in like clockwork. They didn't come because they had to. They weren't earning extra credit. They came because something was happening, something real and rare. Amina brought her younger brother, a 9th grader who claimed he hated math. He stayed 30 minutes after the session ended, just to finish one more problem. Isaiah explained the quadratic formula to a freshman like he'd been born doing it. Jasmine, for the first time in years, didn't panic during a pop quiz. They weren't just learning math. They were learning confidence. And Malcolm, he changed too. Slowly. Quietly. He started bringing a small leather binder with his own notes. He reread old textbooks after work, scribbling fresh examples in the margins, updating metaphors to make them clearer. Not because anyone asked, but because he wanted to be ready. One night, he wrote a word in the margin of a page explaining exponential growth. Legacy. And under it in smaller print, "It's not what you build for yourself. It's what you leave in others." The faculty began to notice. Miss Rowan sat in on a session and borrowed one of Malcolm's examples for her next lesson. Coach Alvarez donated whiteboards from the gym and offered to help organize a summer prep group. The librarian cleared a shelf for Malcolm's materials, labeling it student support. Even Mr. Chase, still adjusting, still learning how to exist in this new reality, started contributing. Quietly. A few extra practice sheets here. A nod in the hallway there. But Malcolm wasn't interested in titles. He knew how the world treated people it praised too quickly, how it loved to lift someone up just to remind them they didn't belong. He didn't want the spotlight. He just wanted to show up. Every time. For every student who didn't believe they were good enough. For every kid who had been made to feel small. For every young person who had only ever been taught to survive, never thrive. Then, one Thursday afternoon, as the session wrapped up and the chairs were being folded, a girl who had never spoken before lingered. She handed Malcolm a sticky note. He read it later, alone. "You didn't just help me understand the math. You helped me stop hating myself for not getting it the first time." He folded it and added it to his binder. That was the real curriculum. Not derivatives. Not logarithms. But belief. Spring crept in quietly through the wide windows of Harrison West High, and with it came a sense of renewal, at least in the corners of the school where Malcolm Greer's voice still echoed. The library's northeast corner was no longer an afterthought. What had once been a dusty stretch of forgotten encyclopedias and old book fair posters had transformed into a space of energy and focus. Students didn't call it class. It wasn't even tutoring, really. It was just Greer circles. And somehow that was enough. It was there that Jasmine Ortega, who had once dreaded math class so much she skipped it twice a week, now stayed after the bell 3 times a week just to get the pattern. Isaiah brought his own markers now, 4 colors because, as he explained to Malcolm, the color coding helps my brain chill. Amina kept a growing collection of notebook pages, meticulously filed, every one marked with neat marginalia quoting Mr. Greer's sayings. "You're not wrong. You're just not there yet. Understanding doesn't rush. It's okay to need a second lap." Malcolm didn't teach like a teacher. He taught like someone who remembered what confusion felt like, how isolating it could be. He didn't solve problems for students. He solved them with them. But while the students leaned in, not everyone did. The quiet backlash had begun to take form. Whispers circulated among some of the more traditional faculty members. Mr. Landon Chase, though visibly more reserved since the whiteboard moment, remained conspicuously absent from the Greer circles. Worse, another email made its way to the district office. Anonymous again, this one more formal than the last. "Is it responsible for the district to allow an uncertified janitor to conduct academic instruction? Have background checks been conducted? Are student boundaries being respected?" The language wasn't hostile, but it was coded. This wasn't about concern. This was about status. It was the familiar hum of resistance dressed in protocol, the same tune Malcolm had heard before, when his mother had been told to enter through the back door of her job, when he'd been overlooked in group projects despite doing the most work, when the professor never asked why he didn't return to campus after his mother's death. Principal Morales read the email twice and shut her laptop without responding. She didn't need to tell Malcolm. He already knew. The signs were subtle but clear. Some teachers stopped making eye contact. Others began observing sessions under the pretense of support. The warmth Malcolm had earned from many staff members now met a cool, bureaucratic skepticism from others. But the students? They never wavered. One Tuesday, Malcolm arrived at the usual time to find something waiting on the whiteboard. A handwritten note in Jasmine's rounded script, circled in purple ink. "Mr. Greer, thank you for seeing us before anyone else did." Next to it, Isaiah had drawn a small cartoon of Malcolm holding a marker like a sword and a mop like a shield. Malcolm chuckled and left it up all week. One afternoon, the room was quiet after a particularly intense session on integration by parts. Trevor stayed behind as the others packed up. "My mom asked me what changed," he said suddenly. "Like why my grades went up." Malcolm raised an eyebrow. "I told her the truth. That someone finally explained things in a way that didn't make me feel like a failure." Trevor paused. She cried a little. Said no one ever did that for her. Malcolm's hands stilled. That one hit deeper than Trevor knew. He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Tell her she did something right. She raised someone who wanted to understand." Moments like that kept Malcolm rooted. They reminded him that his presence wasn't a favor, it was necessary. But the unease wasn't going away. That Friday, Malcolm was emptying the trash in the faculty lounge when Mr. Chase walked in. He paused at the doorway, then stepped inside without a word. For a second, it was just two men standing in a room that neither of them fully belonged to, one by perception, the other by disillusionment. "They're talking about you," Chase said, voice low. Malcolm didn't turn. "They're not happy." Malcolm tied off the trash bag. "That's not new," he said with a faint smile. Chase hesitated, then added, "They're not right either." That silence that followed said more than either could. Mr. Chase wasn't apologizing, he wasn't that kind of man. But something had shifted. He'd seen the difference Greer circles made. He'd seen Jasmine's latest test score. He'd seen Isaiah's notebook filled with eager notes. And maybe, just maybe, he was beginning to understand what real teaching looked like. And then something unexpected happened. The next week, Miss Rowan stopped by a session and sat in the back with a notepad. "Just observing," she said with a wink. 2 days later, Coach Alvarez brought in a mobile whiteboard and a box of Expo markers. "You shouldn't have to keep erasing," he said. Even the librarian labeled a corner shelf student support station and filled it with Malcolm's worksheets. Then, finally, Mr. Chase himself stepped into the circle. He didn't lead. He didn't correct. He just watched, occasionally scribbling on his own notepad. When Malcolm explained a trick for remembering the natural log derivative, Chase nodded thoughtfully. After the students left, he lingered. "You know," he said slowly, "I used to think teaching was about control. Like if I had the room quiet, I was doing it right." Malcolm said nothing. "But these kids, they don't come here for control. They come here because they feel safe." Malcolm looked up. "You can't teach anyone who's scared to be wrong." Chase nodded. "Yeah. Took me too long to learn that." There was no reconciliation speech. No dramatic handshake. Just two educators, one with a tie, one with a tool belt, finding middle ground for the first time. That weekend was the student showcase, a school-wide event meant to highlight the year's achievements. The gymnasium buzzed with parents, students, and colorful poster boards. Band students tuned instruments. Science projects blinked with LED lights. The AV club set up a video wall. And tucked in the far right corner, nearly hidden beside the robotics display, sat a folding table with a simple paper sign taped to the front. Greer's table, what we learned beyond math. There were no equations. No flashy diagrams. Instead there were letters. Dozens of them. Pinned to a corkboard. Handwritten, messy, raw. Each one from a student who had been part of Greer circles. He made me feel smart for the first time. I stopped skipping class because of him. Mr. Greer didn't just help me pass. He made me believe I could. Visitors stopped. Parents read in silence. Some wiped their eyes. Teachers stood nearby in quiet respect. And Malcolm? He didn't make a speech. He didn't stand behind the table. He didn't hand out business cards. He stood to the side, hands folded, nodding occasionally, watching the world catch up to what he had always known. That teaching doesn't require a title. It requires presence. The Monday after the student showcase, Malcolm arrived at school a few minutes earlier than usual. The air smelled faintly of spring rain, and the sunrise cast a soft gold light through the east windows. He wheeled his cart down the hall as always, trash bags tucked to one side, a roll of blue painter's tape dangling from the handle. But something was different. Students nodded as he passed. Some waved. A few smiled and said, "Hey, Mr. Greer." He was no longer invisible. Not because of a viral video or the showcase, or even the growing file of thank you notes in his binder. He was seen now because the kids, those once guarded, self-doubting students, had found something they didn't even know they were looking for. Someone who believed in them before they had proof to offer. At 3:12 p.m. sharp, as the final bell rang and lockers slammed open like a burst of thunder, Malcolm wheeled his cart to the usual corner of the library. And there they were. Jasmine already had her notebook out. Isaiah had a calculator in one hand and a highlighter in the other. Trevor leaned against the wall, reading through a problem Malcolm had designed himself the night before. Amina was helping her younger brother, narrating a problem like it was a story instead of a math equation. Malcolm didn't need to say a word. They had already begun. He simply walked in, set down his binder, and joined them. They were no longer just students. They were a community. And yet, despite all the warmth, despite the growing support from other staff, the shadows hadn't entirely receded. One Tuesday morning, Principal Morales received another email from the district. This one wasn't anonymous. It was from a parent. While we appreciate Mr. Greer's contributions, we must express concern that an uncertified staff member is effectively teaching in an unsupervised academic capacity. Is this within policy? Have liability questions been addressed? Morales exhaled deeply and closed her office door. She called Malcolm in later that afternoon. He sat quietly across from her, hands folded in his lap, listening as she read the message aloud. He didn't look surprised. Only tired. They want clarity, she said. Not necessarily to shut it down, but to make it official. Structured. He nodded slowly. They're offering a pathway, she continued. An elective class. After school. Funded. Resources provided. Eventually, if you're willing, we can help you become certified. The word hung in the air. Certified. It wasn't an insult, but it landed with a kind of finality. Like the world had seen what he could do and still said, prove it. Malcolm leaned back slightly. They mean well, he said. Morales watched him carefully. And what do you want? He looked out the window for a long moment. The gym field swayed in the breeze. A group of kids were tossing a football around, laughing, shouting names. I want the kids to keep coming because they want to, he said. Not because it's required. Not because someone's checking boxes. I can protect that, she said. But if you want the support, stipends, materials, maybe even long-term opportunity, you'll need to accept some structure. Malcolm nodded again. He left the office with the folder she'd offered tucked under one arm. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He said what he always said when the world asked more of him than he'd prepared for. I'll think about it. That night, he returned to his apartment. Opened the worn box beneath his bed. Pulled out the Ohio State sweatshirt. The transcripts. The photo of his mother. He stared at her face for a long time. You always said carry your own key, he whispered. Then he unfolded the newest letter from the showcase, a short one from Isaiah. Mr. Greer, I just got into the summer engineering program. They said it was competitive. I didn't even think I'd apply if you hadn't made me believe I was good enough. Malcolm folded the letter, tucked it into the box, and smiled. The next day he showed up to the library carrying not only his binder, but a rolled-up poster board. Jasmine raised an eyebrow when she saw it. What's that? He unrolled it and pinned it to the bulletin board above the table. Handwritten in thick black marker. This space is for anyone who has ever felt too slow, too behind, too invisible to learn. You belong here. MG. There was no applause. No announcement. Just a quiet stillness as the message settled into the room. Later that week, Principal Morales received another letter. This one was hand-delivered. It was from a freshman's mother who had never once visited the school before. I don't know who this Mr. Greer is, but my son said something I've never heard before. He said, Mom, I think I'm good at something. I don't care what title you give him. Just make sure he stays. And so, Malcolm stayed. Every Tuesday and Thursday, students still gathered. The district watched. Some with curiosity. Some with doubt. But they watched. One afternoon, Malcolm returned to his closet to find a white envelope taped to the inside of the door. Inside was a folded card. On the front, legacy is what you leave behind. Inside, you didn't teach us math. You taught us to believe again. Thank you. He added it to the box. The one under his bed. His private archive of purpose. He didn't need a plaque. He didn't need a raise. He needed this. This space. This trust. This chance to remind students that brilliance doesn't look one way. It doesn't speak in perfect grammar or walk in pressed khakis. Sometimes, brilliance walks quietly with a mop in hand and solves equations like second nature. By mid-April, the northeast corner of the Harrison West High Library had transformed from an overlooked stretch of old furniture into something sacred. No signs were needed. No roll calls. Students just came. Every Tuesday and Thursday after the final bell rang, a soft current of movement swept the halls. Not the usual sprint for the doors, but a quiet convergence. Students flowed toward Malcolm Greer's table like they were heading somewhere they belonged. There were no grades involved. No tests. Just questions, curiosity, and the kind of attention most of them had never received in a classroom. Malcolm greeted each student the same way, by name, eye contact, and an earnest, "What's giving you trouble today?" By now the group had grown so much that the librarian cleared more space. Folding chairs multiplied. New dry erase boards were wheeled in. Teachers began quietly donating supplies, graph paper, markers, rulers, erasers, placing them near Malcolm's table without fanfare, like a silent alliance had been formed. And yet, despite the school's cautious acceptance of the Greer circles, Malcolm still felt the pull of something deeper, a quiet worry that at any moment, someone might decide it had all gone too far. So he prepared. Every night, after his custodial rounds were finished and the students had gone home, Malcolm stayed late. Not to mop or sweep, though he still did those things, but to write. He filled his binder with detailed notes, examples, analogies, and new ways to explain concepts. Not because he wanted to impress the district, but because the kids deserved a guide who never stopped learning. He scribbled reminders to himself in the margins. Start with the why before the how. Don't assume silence means understanding. Some kids won't ask for help, they'll wait for it to be offered. That Thursday, Malcolm arrived to find a group of students waiting, not for tutoring this time but for something else. Trevor stepped forward, holding out a navy blue hoodie. It wasn't fancy. The print was a simple white. Across the front, in block letters, Greer circles, since 11:07 a.m. Malcolm blinked. You all made this? Jasmine grinned. We pooled together. Custom print. Only made a dozen. Amina chimed in. We figured if football gets jerseys, we deserve hoodies. For a moment, Malcolm just stood there holding the hoodie, as if unsure he was allowed to own something that meant this much. Try it on, Mr. Greer, someone yelled. He slipped it over his head. It fit perfectly. That day's session ran longer than usual. No one wanted to leave. The buzz around Greer circles had reached new heights. Students who never set foot in the library were now showing up just to listen. Word had spread to other schools in the district. Even local community college tutors asked to sit in and observe. And yet, in the background, resistance lingered. The district office called a meeting. Principal Morales sat at the center of a long conference table, surrounded by board members, administrators, and one man Malcolm had never met, a district representative named Mr. Clements, clipboard in hand, expression unreadable. We'd like to formalize the program, Clements said. Add structure. Define learning outcomes. Potentially prepare Mr. Greer for certification. Malcolm shifted in his seat. Clements continued. We're not looking to limit you, Mr. Greer. We're looking to ensure sustainability. That students are being guided by qualified educators. Malcolm raised an eyebrow. I understand. But they come to me because I meet them where they are. Not where the syllabus says they should be. A few murmurs passed down the table. Clements cleared his throat. There's also concern about precedent. What message does it send if we allow non-certified personnel to teach without oversight? Principal Morales cut in smoothly. It sends the message that when a student finds someone who helps them learn, who helps them believe in themselves, we don't put up red tape. We listen. Malcolm didn't smile. He didn't defend himself. He just said one thing. If you need to call it something else to make it acceptable, go ahead. But I'm not stopping. There was silence. The kind that fills a room when everyone knows the decision's already been made, but no one wants to be the first to say it aloud. Then Clements spoke. We'll approve the program as an unofficial enrichment space. No credit, no public listing for now. But if interest continues, we'll revisit the conversation in the fall. And if Mr. Greer chooses to pursue certification, we'll fund that path. It wasn't perfect, but it was a beginning. That evening, Malcolm stayed late again, not to clean, not to write, but to stare at the table in the library where it had all begun. He traced the edge of the binder with his finger, thinking about his mother's voice. Her belief in books, in knowledge, in quiet brilliance. He pulled out her photograph from his storage box, stared at her eyes. You were right, he whispered. They can't lock you out if you carry your own key. Later that night, Malcolm opened a new notebook and wrote a single line at the top of the page. Legacy doesn't need a license. The next day, as he walked through the hall with his hoodie on and his binder under one arm, students greeted him not like a janitor, not even like a teacher, but like something else entirely. A bridge. A builder. A quiet storm of change. And at the library corner, under a new sign that read, Greer Circles. Open to all, chairs filled up fast. Isaiah was already solving the warm-up problem. Jasmine had her own worksheet copies to pass out. Amina organized a sign-up sheet for next week's topics. And Malcolm Greer? He took his seat like he always had. On the floor among them. Not above. The last weeks of the school year came fast. Final projects were announced, exam schedules were posted, and spring stretched into early summer like a held breath. But in the library's northeast corner, nothing changed. Malcolm Greer still showed up. Same time. Same place. The hoodie with Greer circles, since 11:07 a.m. became a symbol, not of rebellion but of hope. By now the group had taken on a life of its own. Isaiah, the once shy sophomore, now started every session with a problem of the day he'd written himself. Jasmine created a Google Drive of Malcolm's notes, digitizing his examples and building a growing archive. Trevor led a small breakout circle for underclassmen who struggled with Algebra I, coaching them the same way he'd once been coached, side by side, never condescending. Students didn't just want help anymore. They wanted to help others. Malcolm noticed it all quietly. He'd sit back sometimes, listening more than talking, letting the students answer each other, correcting one another with grace, patience, and surprising precision. They had started coming for answers. But they stayed because they felt seen. Respected. One afternoon, as Malcolm wiped down the board at the end of a long session, a freshman lingered at the table. She clutched a sheet of paper tightly in both hands. When he turned around, she hesitated, then offered it to him. "I know you don't know me well," she said, "but I'm Amina's cousin. I joined the circle last month. I failed math last semester." Malcolm gently took the paper. It was her most recent test, an 89 circled at the top. "First B I've ever gotten," she said, almost shy. "I just wanted you to know, it matters. What you do." He nodded, emotion tightening in his chest. "It always mattered," he said softly. "We just don't always get to see it right away." Later that week, as the school prepared for summer break, a buzz swept through the faculty lounge. A reporter from the local news station was on campus. Word had gotten out about Malcolm's story, through the students, through their parents, through the letters pinned to his showcase board weeks earlier. A blog post titled, "The Janitor Who Taught Us All" had gone semi-viral. It sparked something deeper than clicks. It stirred something people hadn't felt in a while, respect for the uncelebrated. When the reporter approached Malcolm after his shift, he didn't decline the interview. But he didn't play it up either. He stood in front of the whiteboard, hands folded, while students behind him solved problems, laughed, struggled, and supported each other. "What do you think makes this group special?" the reporter asked. Malcolm didn't pause. "They're not afraid of being wrong anymore. And what do you hope they remember most from these sessions?" He glanced back at the kids, then said, "That someone saw them before they got the answer right." The story aired that weekend. Short, understated. No dramatic music. No sweeping narration. Just footage of Malcolm in his hoodie, marker in hand, seated on the floor with 6 students around him, mid-equation. A quiet revolution captured in 92 seconds. By Monday morning, Malcolm still didn't know it had gone viral. He didn't have Instagram. His flip phone couldn't stream video. But he knew something was up when Coach Alvarez gave him a high five, Miss Rowan offered him coffee, and the front office assistant handed him a stack of handwritten thank you letters from parents he'd never met. Later that day, Principal Morales pulled him into her office again. A new folder sat on the desk. "This one's different," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "The district has approved a permanent enrichment course under your guidance. Voluntary, open to all grade levels. You'll lead it. Your own room. Your own schedule. They're calling it Applied Concepts and Confidence." He laughed. "That sounds like a TED Talk title." She chuckled. "Blame the board. But they want to support you, Malcolm. Certification if you want it. Professional development. They'll even cover books." He sat down slowly as if absorbing it all through the floor. "You don't have to say yes today," she added. "But just know, this door is open now. And it's yours." Malcolm didn't answer. Not right away. That night he sat in his apartment. The box under his bed was full now, stuffed with photos, notes, test papers, a few of his own scribbled lesson plans, and a printed copy of that viral article. But he didn't pull it out. Instead, he opened a fresh notebook. On the first page he wrote, "Legacy isn't the mark you leave on the world. It's the light you leave in someone else's mind." He closed the cover and placed it on his desk. And then, as always, he packed his binder, loaded fresh markers, and refilled the pencil jar. Because tomorrow was Tuesday. And Greer circles would meet again. That morning, Malcolm entered the library to find something new. The students had decorated the whiteboard with messages in colored marker. "Thank you for teaching us to think. This circle changed my life. We believe in you, Mr. G." Trevor stood nearby, holding a laminated letter in his hand. "It's from the incoming freshman class," he said. "They asked if the circle was open to them too." Malcolm took the letter, smiled, and turned to the board. "Pull out your notebooks," he said gently. "Let's see what we can solve today." Sometimes, it only takes one person to remind us of who we truly are. In a world obsessed with titles and degrees, Malcolm Greer proved that presence, purpose, and quiet conviction can outteach any curriculum. He didn't stand at the front of the classroom. He sat beside those who needed him most, and in doing so became the teacher they would never forget. As Malcolm once said, "You're not behind. You're just not done yet. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone who saw your potential before you believed in it yourself, then share it. Someone out there might still be waiting to hear, you belong here. Subscribe to True Echo for more powerful real feeling stories like this. Leave a comment below and tell us, who was your Mr. Greer?